Imagine the unimaginable. A young boy, not even a teenager, lying in a hospital bed, his frail body tethered to a web of tubes and monitors. His pale skin is stretched thin, his hollow cheeks a testament to months of suffering. The sterile hum of the machines keeping him alive fills the room, a relentless reminder that every second is borrowed time. This is the story of Liam, a boy battling a rare and aggressive illness. And what happens to him not once, but 3 times, will leave you questioning everything you know about life, death, and what might lie beyond. Liam was only 10 years old when the diagnosis came, a rare cancer that attacked his bone marrow, leaving his immune system defenseless and his body wasting away. His parents, Emily and James, were devastated but determined to fight for their son. They sold their car, dipped into their savings, and started a fundraising campaign, all to afford the expensive treatments that offered only a sliver of hope. Their cozy home became a battlefield with schedules dictated by doctor appointments, chemotherapy sessions, and endless nights in the ICU. Emily stayed by Liam's bedside day and night, her eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep and the relentless tears she tried to hide. James juggled 2 jobs, barely making ends meet while struggling with the overwhelming fear that he might lose his son. Their once lively home was now silent, save for whispered prayers and the occasional beep of Liam's hospital monitors. Liam's condition was worsening. His body had grown too weak to endure more chemotherapy. His once bright eyes were now dulled by pain and exhaustion. He rarely spoke, saving his energy for the few words he could muster to comfort his parents. "I'll be okay." But everyone in that room knew the truth. The doctors had warned Emily and James to prepare for the worst. Liam's fight was coming to an end. The air in the hospital room felt heavy, as if even hope had left. Every day, Emily sat by his side, her hands clutching his, her whispers a mixture of encouragement and desperate prayers. "Please, God," she'd plead under her breath. "Please don't take him. Not yet." The inevitability of death loomed over them like a storm, casting its shadow over every fleeting moment of normalcy. Yet, amid the grief and despair, none of them could have imagined the events that were about to unfold. Events that would challenge science, shake their faith, and forever change their understanding of what lies beyond this life. The room was eerily quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Emily sat by Liam's bedside, her hands trembling as she adjusted the blanket around his frail frame. His breaths were shallow now, coming in soft, uneven gasps. James stood in the corner, his shoulders slumped, his face a mask of silent agony. The doctors had done all they could. This was it. Suddenly, the beeping slowed, each sound spaced further apart, until flatline. A piercing, monotone alarm filled the room, cutting through the silence like a knife. Emily froze, her breath caught in her throat as nurses and doctors rushed in, the room erupting in chaos. "Code Blue," someone shouted. The crash cart was wheeled in, and Liam's lifeless body was surrounded by frantic medical professionals. Emily was ushered out of the room, her legs giving way as she collapsed into the hallway. James caught her before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping around her trembling frame. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "No, this can't be it. Not my boy. Please, God, not my boy." Inside, the medical team worked tirelessly. Chest compressions, adrenaline injections. The harsh commands of doctors cut through the tension. And then, against all odds, a faint blip appeared on the monitor. His heart was beating again. "We've got him," a nurse exclaimed, her voice laced with relief and disbelief. But the moment was fleeting. Minutes later, Liam's heart stopped again. The flatline returned, louder and more final than before. The team redoubled their efforts, determined to save the boy who had already defied the odds. Outside, Emily's sobs echoed through the sterile halls, her prayers growing louder, more desperate. "Please, God," she cried, "don't take him from me. Please bring him back." After what felt like an eternity, the door swung open. A doctor stepped out, his face a mixture of exhaustion and uncertainty. "He's stable," he said cautiously, "but we almost lost him twice." Emily and James rushed to Liam's side. His chest rose and fell weakly, but he was alive. For now, hours passed, and the nightmare seemed to settle. Then, without warning, the flatline returned for the third time. The sound pierced Emily's ears like a dagger to her heart. This time, she dropped to her knees, clutching her chest as though the grief might consume her entirely. Liam was gone, or so it seemed. What happened next defied all logic, leaving even the most seasoned doctors in awe. Against every prediction, every statistical probability, Liam's heart began to beat again. Slowly, then steadily, he was back. But this was no ordinary revival. Liam would later reveal that during those moments of death, he had seen something, a message that chilled him to his very core. What he brought back from the brink would shake everyone who heard it to their very soul. The flatline on the monitor was absolute. To those in the hospital room, Liam was gone. But Liam's journey had only just begun. The first sensation was darkness, a deep, infinite void. Liam felt weightless, as if the tether of his body had been severed. There was no sound, no pain, no fear. Just a stillness so profound that it seemed to stretch beyond time itself. For a moment, he wondered if this was it, if this emptiness was all that awaited him. Then, a faint light began to flicker in the distance, growing stronger and warmer with each passing second. Drawn to it, Liam felt himself moving, not walking, but gliding toward the light. It enveloped him, washing over him with a warmth that was neither too hot nor too cold, but utterly perfect. For the first time in months, Liam felt whole, unburdened by the weight of his illness. The pain was gone. The fear was gone. Everything was right. He found himself standing in a field unlike anything he'd ever seen. Golden grass swayed gently in a breeze that carried an otherworldly melody. The air itself seemed alive, shimmering with colors he couldn't name. Every blade of grass, every particle of light, radiated a love so overwhelming that Liam's heart swelled with joy. He knew, without being told, that he was in a place beyond earth, a place of peace, a place of perfection. He was home. Liam saw figures in the distance, beings bathed in soft, golden light. They moved gracefully, their presence exuding kindness and serenity. Though he didn't recognize their faces, he felt an immediate connection, as if they'd been waiting for him all along. But just as Liam began to absorb the beauty of this realm, he felt a subtle shift. The light around him dimmed slightly, and the harmony in the air faltered. A strange unease crept into his chest. The golden field seemed to ripple, as if responding to an unseen force. Liam turned, searching for the source of the change, and noticed the beings of light looking past him, their expressions growing somber. The once perfect serenity of this place was giving way to something else, something he couldn't quite understand. The air grew heavier, and the light around him began to flicker. Liam's joy was replaced with a growing sense of urgency, as though he were being summoned for a purpose he couldn't yet comprehend. He wasn't afraid, but he knew something was about to happen, and it would change him forever. Liam felt a pull, as though an invisible hand were guiding him forward. The beings of light stepped aside, creating a path that led to a figure unlike any he had seen before. This figure radiated an intensity so profound that it was both comforting and humbling. The light surrounding it wasn't just bright. It was alive, pulsating with an energy that seemed to pierce directly into Liam's soul. Liam instantly knew who it was. There was no need for introductions. This was Jesus, or a being of such divine authority that Liam had no doubt of its heavenly origin. The figure's eyes, though filled with compassion, carried a weight that Liam couldn't ignore. It was as if every truth of the universe rested within that gaze. "My child," the figure spoke, not with words, but with a resonance that filled Liam's entire being. "You have been brought here for a reason." The golden fields around them seemed to fade, replaced by visions that played out before Liam's eyes like a living tapestry. He saw cities crumbling under the weight of greed and corruption. He saw forests burning, oceans rising, and people turning on one another in acts of senseless violence. He saw faces, countless faces, lost in despair, their eyes devoid of hope or faith. Humanity is on a path of self-destruction, the figure continued. Faith is dwindling, and with it, the light of love and kindness that binds all creation together. If this path is not changed, the consequences will be unimaginable. Liam's heart raced as the visions grew darker. He saw families torn apart, nations at war, and natural disasters of an apocalyptic scale. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. The images were seared into his mind, each one more terrifying than the last. But there is hope, the figure said, the light around it intensifying. That is why you are here. You must return to your world and share this warning. Tell them to remember the light, to rekindle their faith, and to act with love and compassion. There is still time, but the window is small. The choice is theirs. Liam felt tears streaming down his face. The weight of the message pressed heavily on his chest. He didn't understand why he had been chosen, but he knew he couldn't refuse. He nodded, his voice barely a whisper. I'll do it. I'll tell them. The figure's light grew even brighter, enveloping Liam in a warmth that filled him with strength and resolve. Go now, my child, it said, and know that you are never alone. In an instant, the visions faded, and Liam felt himself being pulled back, away from the golden fields, away from the divine figure, and back toward the darkness from which he'd come. But this time, he wasn't afraid. He carried with him a message, a purpose, and a terrifying warning that the world desperately needed to hear. As the light faded around Liam, his surroundings transformed into a new vision. Gone were the golden fields of peace and harmony. In their place rose scenes of chaos, destruction, and despair. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating, as Liam stood frozen, watching a vivid tapestry of horrors unfold before him. The first image was of the earth itself, cracked and scorched, its lush greenery replaced by endless deserts. Towering waves crashed against crumbling cities, dragging buildings and lives into the depths. Liam could hear screams, thousands, millions, echoing through the air, a chorus of fear and pain. Fires raged uncontrollably, devouring forests and homes alike, as plumes of smoke blackened the sky. The vision shifted, and Liam saw people, men, women, and children, wandering aimlessly through desolate streets. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes hollow. A mother clutched her starving child, her own strength fading as she searched for food in a barren wasteland. Liam's chest tightened as he realized the scale of the suffering. This wasn't just one place, it was everywhere. And then came the silence. It was a silence deeper and more unsettling than anything Liam had experienced. The people were gone. Cities stood abandoned, their skyscrapers crumbling, overtaken by decay. The world seemed empty, devoid of life, as if humanity had vanished entirely. But it wasn't just the physical absence of people, it was the absence of something far greater. The warmth, the love, the light that had filled heaven was nowhere to be found. This was a world without faith, without hope, without purpose. Liam's heart ached as the scenes continued to play. He saw nations at war, their leaders consumed by greed and power. Brother turned against brother, communities shattered by hatred and fear. The very fabric of society unraveled, leaving only chaos in its wake. Through it all, Liam felt the presence of the figure of light behind him, silently observing. "Why are you showing me this?" he whispered, his voice trembling. The answer came not in words, but in a wave of understanding that filled him. This was the path humanity was heading toward, a future born of neglect, of turning away from love and faith. The contrast to the beauty of heaven was stark, almost unbearable. In heaven, Liam had felt a love so profound it defied description. Here, there was only emptiness, a void where that love had been extinguished. Liam fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "They have to know," he said, his voice breaking. "They have to stop this from happening." The figure of light stepped closer, its presence comforting despite the grim vision. "There is still time," it said, its voice resonating within Liam's soul. "But the choice is theirs. You have seen what could be. Now you must carry this message to them." Liam's fear was matched only by a growing sense of urgency. He had to act. He had to warn them. The visions began to fade, but their weight remained, etched into his very being. He had seen the future, and it was a future that could not come to pass. As the visions of Earth faded, Liam once again found himself enveloped in the light of heaven. The air was warm and gentle, carrying with it the faint melodies of angelic voices. For a moment, he felt peace again, a reprieve from the devastation he had just witnessed. But the figure of light stood before him, its presence both commanding and compassionate. "Liam," it said softly, "your journey here is not yet over. You have been chosen to deliver a message, a warning. Humanity must change its ways, or the path you have seen will come to pass." Liam looked down at his hands, trembling as he absorbed the enormity of what was being asked of him. "But why me?" he asked, his voice filled with doubt. "I'm just a boy. How can I make them listen?" The figure knelt, bringing its radiant form closer to Liam's level. "Because you have seen what lies ahead, and because your heart is pure. You carry the light of hope within you, and that light will guide others. But the choice is yours. You can remain here, in this place of peace and love, or you can return to fulfill your purpose." Liam's breath caught in his throat. The thought of staying in heaven was tempting. Here, there was no pain, no sickness, no suffering. He felt whole, complete, and deeply loved. The idea of returning to Earth, to the broken body he had left behind, filled him with dread. He thought of the hospital room, the machines, the endless treatments, and the looks of anguish on his parents' faces. But then he thought of them, his mom and dad, holding on to hope even when there was none. He thought of the people in the visions, their suffering and despair. If he didn't return, who would deliver the warning? Who would carry the message that humanity needed to hear? "I'll go back," Liam said, his voice steady despite the fear in his heart. "I'll tell them. They need to know." The figure's light grew brighter, radiating approval and love. "You are brave, Liam," it said. "Your choice will not be easy, but it is the right one. Remember, you are not alone. The light of heaven will always be with you." In that moment, Liam felt a surge of strength and purpose. The warmth of the figure enveloped him, and he felt himself being pulled away from the golden fields. The melodies of heaven faded, replaced by the distant hum of machines and the muffled voices of doctors. With a gasp, Liam's eyes flew open. He was back, but he was no longer just a boy fighting for his life. He was a messenger, carrying a warning from heaven itself, and he knew his mission was only beginning. The hospital room was somber, filled with an unbearable stillness broken only by the hum of machines. Liam lay lifeless on the hospital bed, his small chest no longer rising and falling. The monitors confirmed what the medical staff feared. Liam's heart had stopped for the third and final time. Emily clung to James, her sobs echoing through the sterile room, her world shattering as the doctors prepared to call the time of death. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. A faint beep pierced through the monotone flat line. The nurse gasped, her eyes darting to the monitor. "Wait, there's a pulse," she exclaimed. The doctor, already removing his gloves, rushed back to the bedside, disbelief etched across his face. The once flat line now flickered with life as Liam's heart started beating again, weakly at first, but growing stronger with each passing second. Emily froze, her tear-streaked face lifting toward the bed as the impossible unfolded before her eyes. James gripped her shoulders, his own shock evident as the chaos erupted around them. "He's coming back," shouted one of the nurses as they scrambled to stabilize Liam's vitals. The air was electric with disbelief and awe. It wasn't just that Liam's heart had restarted. This was the third time. Doctors exchanged glances, their medical expertise failing to explain the miracle unfolding before them. The tension in the room was thick, but in that moment, hope flickered where there had been none. Liam's eyelids fluttered. His lips moved as if he were trying to form words. Emily rushed to his side, gripping his fragile hand. "Liam? Sweetheart, can you hear me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Slowly, Liam's eyes opened. The fluorescent lights above seemed harsh, but Liam's gaze was steady, focused, as if he were looking beyond the physical world around him. His small voice broke the silence. I saw it," he murmured, his words halting but deliberate. The room fell silent again. Emily leaned closer, her heart pounding. "Saw what, Liam?" she asked softly. He turned his head slightly, his eyes locking with hers. "Heaven and the future. It's not what you think. We have to change before it's too late." Liam's voice carried a gravity far beyond his years. His tone, marked with fear and solemnity, sent chills through everyone in the room. He began to recount his experience, each word measured, each phrase heavy with meaning. As he spoke of golden fields, angelic figures, and the visions of Earth's destruction, the disbelief among the medical staff turned to quiet awe. Emily and James clung to his every word, their grief momentarily replaced by an overwhelming sense of wonder. Liam's final words that day echoed in the minds of everyone present. "We still have time, but we have to act. It's not too late yet." The news of Liam's miraculous revival spread quickly through the hospital, leaving staff and patients alike in awe. Doctors, unable to explain his recovery, labeled it a medical anomaly. But for Liam and his family, it was something far greater. It was a message, and it had to be shared. Sitting upright in his hospital bed, Liam began to recount his journey in vivid detail to his parents and the medical team. He described the golden fields of heaven, the warmth of divine love, and the figure of light that had delivered the warning. But when he spoke of the visions of Earth, natural disasters, war, and a world devoid of faith, a solemn hush fell over the room. His mother clutched her chest, her eyes wide with fear and sorrow. "How could this happen?" she asked. "What can we do?" Liam's small voice answered, steady despite the weight of his words. "We have to believe. We have to love each other again. If we don't, everything I saw will come true." The story began to spread beyond the hospital. Emily and James shared Liam's account with their pastor, who invited him to speak at their church. News outlets picked up the story, and soon people from all over were reaching out, desperate to hear the boy's message. Some saw him as a miracle, a child chosen to deliver a divine warning. Others were more skeptical, dismissing his experience as the hallucinations of a dying brain or the effects of medication. At times, Liam struggled with the weight of his mission. For every person who was inspired by his story, there were others who mocked him, accusing him of fabricating the tale or seeking attention. The skepticism hurt, but Liam remained steadfast. He knew what he had seen, and he knew his purpose. Despite his youth, Liam spoke with a conviction that silenced many of his critics. At churches, schools, and community gatherings, he described the beauty of heaven and the dire future awaiting Earth if humanity did not change. He urged people to return to faith, to treat one another with kindness, and to act with love and compassion. For Liam, the burden was heavy, but it was also a gift. Each time he recounted his experience, he felt the presence of the figure of light, guiding him, strengthening him. And while some dismissed him, others found hope and inspiration in his words. Families mended broken relationships, individuals renewed their faith, and communities came together, spurred on by the message of a boy who had seen both heaven and the horrors of a world without it. Liam's mission was far from over, but he embraced it with quiet determination. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but he also knew that the light of heaven was with him, and that, as long as he had a voice, he would use it to deliver the warning that could save the world. Liam's return to life was nothing short of a miracle, but the journey ahead was anything but easy. His body bore the scars of his illness and his brushes with death. Physical therapy became a daily battle as he worked to regain strength, his once vibrant energy now tempered by the fragility of his condition. But it wasn't just his body that carried the weight, his soul did too. The visions of heaven and the warnings of Earth's potential future haunted Liam's thoughts. At night, he would wake in a cold sweat, reliving the devastation he had seen. The cries of suffering, the empty cities, the hollow faces of humanity's collapse. They played on a loop in his mind. And yet, alongside the darkness, there was the memory of light, the warmth of heaven, the love that filled every corner of that divine realm. It was this memory that kept him grounded, reminding him of his purpose. Liam's parents noticed the change in him. He was no longer the carefree boy they once knew. He spoke with a wisdom far beyond his years, his words deliberate and measured. He spent hours in quiet reflection, often writing down his thoughts in a notebook. Emily would sometimes find him staring out the window, his gaze distant but intense. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she would ask gently. "I'm fine, Mom," he would reply, though the weight in his voice betrayed him. I need to make them understand." It wasn't long before Liam began to share his story beyond the confines of his home. At first, it was small gatherings, family friends, neighbors, and their church congregation. But as word spread, invitations poured in. Churches, schools, and community centers wanted to hear the boy who had returned from death and brought back a message from heaven. Standing before crowds of people, Liam often felt the enormity of his mission pressing down on him. He spoke of the beauty of heaven, describing the golden fields and the overwhelming sense of love and peace. But it was when he spoke of the warning that the room would fall silent. He painted vivid pictures of the future he had seen, the wars, the destruction, the spiritual emptiness that awaited humanity if they didn't change their ways. Some listened with rapt attention, their eyes brimming with tears. Others were skeptical, their expressions unreadable. Liam didn't let the doubt deter him. "I'm not here to convince you," he would say. "I'm here to tell you what I saw. The choice is yours." Despite the growing crowds and the stories of lives being changed, Liam often felt alone. The burden of carrying such a message weighed heavily on his young shoulders. Yet, he pressed on, driven by the memory of the figure of light and the hope that his words might spark the change humanity so desperately needed. By the time Liam stood on stage at a national conference, his story had reached people far and wide. The room was packed, the air buzzing with anticipation. Cameras captured every moment as Liam approached the microphone, his small frame dwarfed by the enormity of the platform. He took a deep breath, his heart steady with resolve. "Thank you for being here," he began, his voice calm but commanding. "I don't stand before you as someone extraordinary. I'm just a boy who was given a second chance and a message I can't ignore." He recounted his experience once more, from the golden fields of heaven to the horrifying visions of Earth's potential future. His words painted a stark contrast, a world filled with love and faith versus one consumed by greed, hatred, and indifference. The audience hung on every word, their expressions ranging from awe to anguish. "I was shown what happens when we forget who we are," Liam continued, his voice growing stronger. "When we forget the light, when we lose our faith and stop loving one another, we create a world where darkness thrives. The future I saw was not a punishment. It was a consequence of our choices." Liam paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But it doesn't have to be this way," he said, his tone shifting to one of hope. "We still have time to turn back to the light, time to restore kindness, to rebuild faith, to live with purpose. It starts with each of us, in our homes, our communities, and our hearts." His words echoed through the room, a call to action that was both urgent and empowering. He spoke directly to the audience, his eyes scanning the sea of faces. "This isn't just about avoiding destruction. It's about creating something beautiful, a world where we love without condition, where we help without hesitation, where we live not for ourselves but for something greater." Tears filled Emily's eyes as she watched her son, her heart swelling with pride and awe. Liam stood as a beacon of hope, his small figure radiating the light of the message he had been entrusted with. He ended with a final plea. "Even in the darkest moments, there is always light. There is always hope. But we have to choose it. We have to fight for it. And we have to do it now." The room erupted in applause, but Liam didn't bask in the attention. He stepped away from the microphone, his mission far from over. As the applause faded, Liam felt a quiet reassurance in his heart. He had delivered the message, planted the seeds of change. The rest was up to them. And so, with the weight of heaven's warning still heavy on his young shoulders, Liam walked off the stage, his purpose clear. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but he carried with him the unwavering light of faith, hope, and the belief that humanity could still choose a better path. Want to hear more of this? Then click on the video on the right-hand side, which is even more insane.